The morning fog hung low over Millbrook Valley as Rebecca Hartley stood at the edge of what could become either her family's salvation or their financial ruin. Her worn leather boots sank slightly into the dew-soaked grass as she gazed across. The 127 acres of Cedar Hills Farm, a property that had weathered nearly 3 centuries of American history. In just 2 hours, she would enter the Millbrook Community Center with every penny of her late husband's life insurance money, prepared to bid against Sterling Development Corporation, one of the largest real estate conglomerates on the East Coast. What she couldn't possibly know was that beneath the weathered stone barn just visible through the morning mist lay a secret that would not only change her family's destiny, but rewrite a crucial chapter of American history itself. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm on Rebecca's phone buzzed at 5:30 a.m., though she'd been awake since 4, her mind cycling through calculations and contingencies. 3 years had passed since David's sudden death from a brain aneurysm. 3 years of struggling to keep their small organic vegetable operation afloat while raising 2 children alone. The walls of their rented farmhouse seemed to close in, a little more each month as expenses mounted and opportunities dwindled. Her eyes fell on the framed photograph beside her bed, David's infectious smile captured at their own farm's harvest festival just months before his death. They'd lost that property to medical debts and funeral expenses, a crushing blow that had forced them into this cramped rental on the outskirts of town. Emma appeared in her doorway, already dressed, despite the early hour. "Mum, I made coffee," her 15-year-old daughter announced, her voice carrying a maturity that no teenager should have to possess. Since David's death, Emma had transformed from a carefree preteen into Rebecca's unofficial co-parent, helping with Lucas, managing household tasks, and working part-time at the local farmers market to contribute to their tight budget. "Thank you, sweetheart," Rebecca replied, pulling on the one business jacket she owned, a navy blazer she'd last worn to David's funeral. "Is your brother up yet?" "Lucas is feeding the chickens," Emma said, referring to the small flock they kept in the backyard, one of the few remnants of their former farming life. "He's worried about today. I told him everything would be fine, but..." Rebecca crossed the room and pulled her daughter into a hug. "We're going to be fine, no matter what happens. This auction is an opportunity, not our last hope." The words sounded hollow, even to her own ears. The truth was, she'd spent months researching every available property within a 100-mile radius, and Cedar Hills was the only one that made financial sense, even at its distressed price. The property had sat abandoned since the last elderly owner, Theodore Hayes, had died without heirs 5 years ago. Legal complications had kept it in limbo until the state finally cleared it for auction. During those years of neglect, the fields had grown wild. The historic stone farmhouse had suffered water damage, and the outbuildings had fallen into disrepair. Most potential buyers saw a money pit, but Rebecca saw potential. Her agricultural background told her the soil was exceptional, the water rights were valuable, and the southern exposure was perfect for the sustainable farming operation she envisioned. "Besides," Rebecca added, trying to inject optimism into her voice, "we've done our homework. I know exactly what this property can produce, and our business plan is solid." Emma nodded, but concern lingered in her eyes. "What about Sterling Development? Mrs. Patterson at the market said they've bought 6 farms in the valley this year alone." Rebecca had spent sleepless nights thinking about Sterling Development and their systematic acquisition of farmland throughout Hartwell County. Led by Victoria Sterling, the company had a reputation for transforming agricultural properties into luxury housing developments and shopping centers. Their deep pockets and aggressive tactics had driven many farming families from lands they'd worked for generations. "Let me worry about Sterling," Rebecca said, though the knot in her stomach tightened at the mention of the corporation. Her entire strategy hinged on the property's condition being too deteriorated to interest serious developers. She was betting that Sterling would see only the renovation costs, not the land's intrinsic value. Downstairs, Lucas sat at the kitchen table. His math homework spread before him, but his attention clearly elsewhere. At 11, he possessed David's analytical mind and gentle nature, often losing himself in books about history and science. The upheaval of the past 3 years had made him quieter, more introspective, but his faith in his mother remained absolute. "Mom, did you know that Cedar Hills was part of the original land grant to Colonel Josiah Hayes after the Revolutionary War?" Lucas said, looking up from a library book about local history. He was friends with several founding fathers. Thomas Jefferson even visited the property in 1791. Rebecca smiled, ruffling his sandy hair. "I didn't know that. Where did you learn this?" "Mr. Whitmore at the library helped me research it," Lucas replied, his eyes brightening with enthusiasm. He said the Hayes family were important in early American politics. Colonel Hayes's journals are supposedly lost, but historians think they contained correspondence about the Constitutional Convention. "That's fascinating, honey," Rebecca said, though her mind was already racing ahead to the auction. Historical significance might add cultural value, but it wouldn't help with the mortgage payments. "Finish your breakfast. Mrs. Cooper will be here soon to watch you." The drive to the Millbrook Community Center took 20 minutes through winding country roads flanked by cornfields and dairy farms. Rebecca's ancient Volvo wagon, another remnant of better times, coughed and wheezed. Up the hills, but faithfully carried her toward her destination. She'd arranged for Agnes Cooper, their neighbor, to stay with the children during the auction, not wanting them to witness what could be either triumph or devastating disappointment. The community center parking lot was already filling when she arrived at 8:30, 90 minutes before the auction start. Rebecca recognized many faces from the local farming community, some undoubtedly here for the same property, others perhaps interested in equipment lots being sold from various estates. Her heart sank when she spotted the sleek black Mercedes SUV with tinted windows that could only belong to Sterling Development. Inside, Frank Morrison, the county's longtime auctioneer, was arranging lots and checking his microphone. The main hall had been set up with rows of folding chairs facing a raised platform. Rebecca chose a seat in the third row, close enough to be clearly seen, but not so prominent as to draw unwanted attention. She clutched her folder containing the bank check, property analysis, and business plan she'd prepared, though she knew every detail by heart. Rebecca Hartley." The voice came from behind her. She turned to find Gerald Whitmore, the elderly local historian who had helped Lucas with his research. His weather-beaten face creased into a warm smile as he settled into the adjacent chair. "Mr. Whitmore," she greeted him, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Please call me Jerry," he insisted. "I wouldn't miss this auction for the world. Cedar Hills is one of the most historically significant properties in the county. I'm hoping whoever buys it will preserve its heritage." His keen eyes studied her face. "Your boy tells me you're planning to bid." Rebecca nodded, suddenly self-conscious about her modest appearance compared to the other potential buyers filing in. "It's the right size for what I want to do, and the price point works, if I can get it." Jerry leaned closer, lowering his voice. "The Hayes property has secrets, you know. Old Theodore used to tell stories about hidden rooms and underground passages dating back to the Revolution. Most people dismissed them as tall tales, but I've seen documents suggesting there's truth to them." He paused, glancing around. Sterling Development has been asking questions about the property's history. Unusual questions for a company only interested in development. Before Rebecca could ask what he meant, a stir rippled through the crowd. Victoria Sterling had entered, flanked by two associates in expensive suits. Even from across the room, the CEO projected an aura of confident authority. In her early 50s, Sterling had built her company from a small real estate firm into a regional powerhouse. Her silver hair was pulled back in an elegant chignon, and her charcoal suit probably cost more than Rebecca's monthly rent. "That's her," someone whispered behind Rebecca, "the queen of concrete." Sterling's gaze swept the room, pausing briefly on Rebecca before moving on. There was something calculating in that look, as if she were mentally cataloguing potential competition. Her associates spread out, one taking a position near the back while the other sat directly behind the auctioneer's podium. "Ladies and gentlemen, if you'll take your seats, we'll begin shortly," Frank Morrison announced. "We have several properties to auction today, with Cedar Hills Farm as our featured lot." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rebecca's palms grew damp as she watched Morrison organize his notes. Everything she'd saved, borrowed, and scraped together amounted to $440,000. The property's assessed value was $750,000, but given its condition and the extensive repairs needed, the starting bid was set at $350,000. She'd calculated that anything over $450,000 would make her business plan untenable. "Before we begin," Morrison continued, "I need to remind everyone that all sales are final. Properties are sold as is, and successful bidders must provide a 10% deposit immediately with full payment due within 30 days. The first two properties sold quickly, small residential lots that drew minimal interest. Rebecca barely registered the proceedings, her attention split between watching Sterling's team and mentally rehearsing her bidding strategy. She'd participated in equipment auctions before, but never anything of this magnitude. "Now for Lot 3, Morrison announced, his voice taking on a theatrical tone. "Cedar Hills Farm, 127 acres, including a historic stone farmhouse, circa 1774, 3 barns, various outbuildings, and extensive road frontage along Route 47. Significant repairs needed. Sold as is. We'll start the bidding at $350,000. Rebecca raised her paddle before doubt could creep in. $350. $350 from bidder number 12. Do I hear $375? One of Sterling's associates raised his paddle with casual indifference. $375. $400, Rebecca countered immediately, trying to project confidence she didn't feel. $425, came Sterling's bid, the associate not even glancing in Rebecca's direction. The room grew quiet, spectators sensing a David and Goliath, a battle forming. Rebecca had anticipated this, knowing Sterling would test her resolve early. $450, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. $500,000, Sterling's associate announced, the jump intended to intimidate. Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face. They'd already exceeded her absolute limit, and Sterling showed no signs of strain. She glanced at her folder, at the business plan she'd crafted so carefully, at the future she'd envisioned for her children on that land. $500,000 going once, Morrison called out, his experienced eye reading Rebecca's hesitation. Jerry Whitmore leaned close to her ear. The stories about the property, there's more to them than folklore. Theodore showed me something. Once years ago, said it was worth more than the land itself. Going twice. Rebecca's mind raced. She had $440,000. She could possibly borrow another $20,000 from her sister, though it would strain their relationship. The property was already beyond her reach, and yet something in Jerry's urgent whisper made her hesitate to lower her paddle. "525, she heard herself say, the words seeming to come from someone else. A murmur ran through the crowd. Sterling's associate turned to look at her for the first time, his expression shifting from casual dismissal to mild interest. He pulled out his phone, apparently texting for instructions. "525 from bidder 12. Do I hear 550? The associate waited, phone in hand. Rebecca could see Victoria Sterling in her peripheral vision, sitting perfectly still, her expression unreadable. The silence stretched out, tension building like a physical presence in the room. Finally, Sterling's associate raised his paddle. 600,000. The jump was meant to be decisive, to end any illusion that Rebecca could compete. Gasps came from several directions. The bid far exceeded the property's condition-adjusted value, suggesting Sterling had reasons beyond simple development for wanting the land. Rebecca's shoulders sagged. It was over. She tried and failed, and now she'd have to face her children with the news that their dream of returning to farming would remain just that, a dream. 600,000. Morrison repeated, his tone suggesting he too was surprised by the amount. Do I hear 625? Rebecca shook her head slightly, beginning to lower her paddle in defeat. As she did, a folded piece of paper appeared. On her lap, she looked down to find a bank check with Jerry Whitmore's signature. The amount made her breath catch, $200,000. For historical preservation, Jerry whispered. Some things are worth more than money. Bid what you need to. Rebecca stared at the check, her mind struggling to process this unexpected lifeline. Around her, the room seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see if the single mother would continue her improbable challenge to the development giant. Ma'am, Morrison prompted gently, the bid stands at 600,000. Rebecca looked up, meeting Victoria Sterling's gaze across the room. Something flickered in the CEO's eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or calculation. Rebecca straightened in her chair, Jerry's check clutched in her trembling hand. 625,000, she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. The effect was immediate. Sterling's associates converged on their CEO, whispering urgently. Several people in the audience began talking excitedly. Morrison himself seemed taken aback by the turn of events. 625 from bidder 12, he announced, recovering his professional demeanor. Do I hear 650? Victoria Sterling stood slowly, her movement drawing every eye in the room. Instead of bidding, she walked directly toward Rebecca, her heels clicking against the wooden floor. The crowd parted before her like water. May I? Sterling asked, gesturing to the empty chair beside Rebecca. Rebecca nodded, too surprised to speak. Up close, Sterling's presence was even more intimidating. But there was something else in her expression now, a hint of genuine curiosity. You're Rebecca Hartley, Sterling said. It wasn't a question. Former agricultural consultant, widow, mother of 2. You ran Hartley Sustainable Farms until 3 years ago. You've done your research, Rebecca managed. I research all potential. Competition, Sterling replied. Though I'll admit I didn't expect you to push this far, the property needs at least $200,000 in repairs to be habitable. Your business plan, yes, I know about that too, barely supports the original asking price. Rebecca felt anger flare through her fear. Then why are you bidding so high? The development value doesn't justify 600,000, not with the infrastructure costs. Sterling's smile was sharp as winter frost. You assume I'm interested in development. Ladies, Morrison interrupted apologetically. I need to continue the auction. We're at 625. Miss Sterling, do you wish to bid? Sterling studied Rebecca for a long moment, then stood. 700,000, she announced, her voice cutting through the room's chatter. The amount was absurd, nearly double the starting price. Rebecca felt the weight of defeat settling on her shoulders again. Even with Jerry's generous offer, she couldn't match that figure. But as she started to shake her head, Jerry gripped her arm. 800,000, the elderly historian called out, rising to his feet. The room erupted. Morrison struggled to maintain order as people stood to get a better view. Sterling whirled to face Jerry, her composure cracking for the first time. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, her tone dangerously quiet, "this is a rather sudden interest in real estate for a retired librarian." Jerry smiled serenely. "I'm bidding on behalf of Ms. Hartley and the Millbrook Historical Preservation Society. We believe Cedar Hills has cultural significance that transcends its commercial value." Sterling's eyes narrowed. "The Historical Preservation Society doesn't have that kind of money." "We've been fundraising quietly," Jerry replied. "Amazing what a community can accomplish when motivated." Rebecca looked between them, feeling like a spectator in her own story. The undercurrents in the room suggested this was about more than a simple property transaction. Morrison cleared his throat. "The bid stands at 800,000, Miss Sterling." For the first time, Victoria Sterling appeared genuinely conflicted. She pulled out her phone, stepping away for a hurried conversation. The room buzzed with speculation as everyone waited to see what the corporate giant would do next. When Sterling returned, her expression was resigned but strangely satisfied. "Sterling Development withdraws from the bidding," she announced. Then looking directly at Rebecca, she added, "Congratulations, Ms. Hartley. I hope you discover what you're looking for." The phrasing was odd, but Rebecca had no time to analyze it as Morrison's gavel came down. "Sold to bidder number 12 for $800,000. The next hour passed in a blur of paperwork, congratulations, and confused explanations. Jerry produced documentation showing the Historical Preservation Society had indeed raised funds, though Rebecca suspected the full amount had materialized quite recently. As she signed document after document, her mind struggled to process that. She now owned Cedar Hills Farm. "Why?" she finally asked Jerry as they stood outside the community center. "Why did you do this?" The old man's eyes twinkled with something between mischief and purpose. "Because some secrets are meant to be found by the right people. Your husband was David Hartley, wasn't he? The descendant of Jonathan Hartley?" Rebecca nodded slowly. "David's family traced their lineage back to the Revolution. Jonathan Hartley was an aide-de-camp to General Washington. But what does that have to do with everything?" Jerry interrupted. "The Hayes and Hartley families were connected in ways most people have forgotten. There are stories, documents that suggest, well, perhaps it's better if you discover it yourself." Before Rebecca could press for more information, her phone rang. Emma's excited voice burst through the speaker before she could even say hello. "Mom, did you get it? Mrs. Cooper said people are talking about it all over town. They said you won." "We got it, sweetheart," Rebecca confirmed, still dazed, "though it's a bit more complicated than I expected. Lucas is going crazy. He wants to start researching the property's history right away. Can we come see it today?" Rebecca glanced at her watch. It was barely noon, though it felt like days had passed since morning. "Let me handle the paperwork first. We'll go together. This afternoon, I promise." As she ended the call, she noticed Victoria Sterling approaching. The CEO had dismissed her entourage and walked alone, her earlier hostility replaced by something harder to read. "Ms. Hartley," Sterling began, "I owe you an explanation, or at least a warning. My interest in Cedar Hills wasn't about development. We've been tracking historical properties connected to certain Revolutionary War figures. Our research suggests there are undiscovered documents of significant value hidden somewhere on that land." Rebecca's mind flashed to Jerry's cryptic comments. What kind of documents? Letters, journals, possibly even treaties that were never officially recorded. The Hayes family were more than farmers. They were trusted couriers for sensitive correspondence between founding fathers. Some historians believe they maintained copies of everything that passed through their hands. And you wanted these documents? Why? Surely Sterling Development isn't in the historical artifact business. Sterling's smile was rueful. Let's say certain international clients have interests in early American diplomatic history. Documents that might shed light on old land grants, territorial agreements, even early diplomatic arrangements could be very valuable to the right parties. Rebecca felt a chill despite the warm afternoon sun. You're talking about documents that could affect modern legal claims? Possibly. Or they could be worthless historical curiosities. We won't know now, will we? Sterling extended her hand. Good luck, Ms. Hartley. You've bought yourself quite a mystery. I hope you're prepared for what you might find. After Sterling departed, Rebecca stood in the parking lot, keys to the property clutched in her hand. What had seemed like a straightforward, if desperate, attempt to secure her family's future had transformed into something far more complex. Historical mysteries, corporate intrigue, and cryptic warnings swirled through her mind. But beneath the confusion and apprehension, she felt something else, a sense of destiny, as if invisible threads had been drawing her to this moment all along. David had often talked about his family's historical connections with boyish enthusiasm she'd found endearing, if irrelevant to their modern struggles. Now she wondered if those connections were more significant than either of them had imagined. The drive to Cedar Hills took her through the heart of Millbrook Valley, past farms and fields she knew by heart. As she turned onto the long gravel drive leading to the property, her breath caught. Despite its dilapidated condition, the main house stood proud against the afternoon sky, its weathered stone walls testimony to centuries of endurance. She parked in front of the covered porch and sat for a moment, absorbing the reality of ownership. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant call of a red-tailed hawk circling overhead. Stepping out of the car, she approached the front door with the ornate brass key the attorney had provided. The lock turned with surprising ease, and the heavy oak door swung inward on well-oiled hinges. Someone had maintained at least this part of the property. The interior was dim, dust motes dancing in shafts of sunlight streaming through tall windows. The air smelled of age and abandonment, but underneath lurked something else, the faint scent of lavender and old paper. Rebecca moved through the room slowly, her footsteps echoing on wide plank floors. The house was federal style, with high ceilings, elaborate crown moldings, and fireplaces in every room. Despite years of neglect, the bones were good. She could envision her children here, could see Christmas trees in the parlor, and family dinners in the formal dining room. In what must have been the library, built-in bookcases stretched from floor to ceiling, most empty now, but still impressive. A massive desk dominated one end of the room, its surface scarred but solid. As Rebecca ran her hand across the wood, she noticed something odd, a series of small holes drilled in a precise pattern near one edge. Her agricultural background included enough engineering to recognize mounting points when she saw them. Something had been attached to this desk, something requiring very specific positioning. She knelt to examine the underside and discovered more holes, along with what looked like the remains of a mechanical assembly. Curious, she murmured, thinking of the historical significance everyone kept hinting at. What kind of mechanism would have been mounted on a colonial-era desk? A text from Emma interrupted her exploration. "Mom, can we come now? Lucas found something interesting in his research." Rebecca smiled, typing back, "Give me 30 minutes to check the utilities, then come with Mrs. Cooper." She needed to ensure basic safety before bringing the children. The house had electricity, though several circuits were dead. Water flowed, rust-colored at first but cleared quickly. The heating system was oil-fired and ancient, but appeared functional. It would do for now. Moving outside, she surveyed the outbuildings. 3 barns in varying states of decay stood behind the house. The largest, built of the same weathered stone as the main house, drew her attention. Unlike the others, its doors were secured with modern padlocks that seemed incongruous with the colonial architecture. As she approached, she noticed something else odd. The ground around the barn's foundation showed signs of recent disturbance, not the random patterns of weather and wildlife, but deliberate excavation marks, as if someone had been digging along the walls. Before she could investigate further, the sound of tires on gravel announced her children's arrival. Mrs. Cooper's sensible sedan pulled up beside Rebecca's car, and Lucas burst out before it had fully stopped. "Mom! Mom! You won't believe what I found!" He waved a printout as he ran toward her. "Mr. Whitmore helped me access the Historical Society's digital archives. Look!" Rebecca took the paper, a scanned image of an old letter. The handwriting was faded but legible. July 15th, 1789. My dear Hayes, the documents we discussed must remain protected until such time as our young nation finds firmer footing. Your suggestion of a permanent archive beneath the old foundation is sound. I trust your discretion in this matter above all others. Your friend in perpetuity, B. Franklin. Rebecca stared at the signature, her heart racing. Lucas, is this authenticated? Mr. Whitmore says it's from the Thornton collection at the State Archives. There are more letters mentioning documents being stored at Cedar Hills. Something about insurance against future claims and protecting original drafts. Emma joined them, her expression mixing excitement with concern. "Mom, are you okay? You look pale." Rebecca forced a smile. "I'm fine, honey, just processing everything. This place is full of surprises." Mrs. Cooper approached, her grandmotherly face creased with worry. "Rebecca, dear, I don't mean to intrude, but there were some men asking about you in town. They said they represented international historical collectors, very persistent about wanting to know if you'd found anything interesting at the property." The pieces clicked together in Rebecca's mind. Sterling's comments about international clients, the recent excavation marks, the elaborate security on an old barn. Whatever secrets Cedar Hills held, others were actively searching for them. "Thank you for watching the children, Agnes," Rebecca said. "We'll be fine from here." After Mrs. Cooper left, Rebecca gathered Emma and Lucas close. "Okay, family meeting. We own this place now. But it seems we've inherited more than just a farm. There may be historical documents hidden somewhere on the property, documents that various people seem very interested in finding." "Like treasure hunting?" Lucas asked, his eyes bright with excitement. "Sort of," Rebecca agreed. "But we need to be careful. Some of these people might not have the best intentions. For now, let's explore together and see what we can find. But we stay together, and we don't tell anyone outside the family what we discover. Deal?" Both children nodded solemnly. Together, they approached the stone barn with its incongruous modern locks. Rebecca found bolt cutters in one of the other outbuildings and made quick work of the padlocks. The barn doors, despite their age, swung open smoothly to reveal a space that defied expectations. Instead of farm equipment and hay bales, the barn's interior had been converted into what looked like a research facility. Modern tables held computers and scanning equipment. File cabinets lined one wall. A large map of the property covered another, marked with various symbols and notations. "Whoa," Emma breathed. "This isn't what I expected to find in a colonial barn." Rebecca moved to the computers, finding them password protected but recently used. The file cabinets were locked, but labels suggested they contained historical surveys, ground-penetrating radar results, and archaeological assessments. Someone had been systematically searching for something. "Mom, over here!" Lucas called from the far end of the barn. He stood beside what appeared to be a simple stone wall, but as Rebecca approached, she noticed metal hinges cleverly concealed. In the mortar, a section of the wall was actually a door. Working together, they managed to swing the stone panel open, revealing a steep staircase descending into darkness. Cool air flowed up from below, carrying that same mixture of lavender and old paper she'd noticed in the house. Rebecca found flashlights in the research equipment and tested them carefully. "Stay close," she instructed, leading the way down the stone steps. The staircase was narrow but well constructed, each stone fitted precisely without mortar. At the bottom, they emerged into a vaulted chamber that took their breath away. The underground room stretched at least 40 feet in length, its ceiling supported by graceful stone arches. Along the walls stood wooden cabinets with glass doors, their contents dimly visible in the flashlight beams. A long table occupied the center of the space, covered with carefully arranged documents under protective glass. "It's a library," Emma whispered, her voice echoing slightly. "An underground library." Lucas moved to the nearest cabinet, shining his light through the glass. "These are journals," he said excitedly. "Look at the dates, 1776, 1777, 1778. They go all the way through the Revolutionary War." Rebecca approached the central table, her heart pounding as she read the document, displayed under the glass. It was a letter in elegant handwriting, addressed to Josiah Hayes and signed by Thomas Jefferson. But it wasn't the signature that made her gasp, it was the content. The letter discussed a secondary archive of essential documents, including original drafts and private correspondence regarding the structure of our new government. "Mom!" Emma stood beside another cabinet, her flashlight illuminating rows of leather-bound volumes. "These journals all have the same symbol on their spines. It looks like intertwined letters, H and H." Rebecca joined her daughter, studying the symbol. "Hayes and Hartley," she murmured, remembering Jerry's words about the families being connected. She pulled out her phone to photograph the symbol, but found no signal in the underground chamber. As they explored further, the scope of the collection became clear. This wasn't just a random accumulation of old papers, it was a carefully curated archive of documents related to the founding of the United States, including correspondence that appeared nowhere in official histories. Letters between founding fathers discussing controversial compromises, drafts of constitutional provisions that were never adopted, private journals detailing the real negotiations behind public positions. "This is incredible," Rebecca said, her mind reeling. "If these documents are authentic, they could change our understanding of early American history." A sound from above made them all freeze. Footsteps in the barn, heavy and deliberate. Rebecca quickly turned off her flashlight, motioning for the children to do the same. In the darkness, they heard voices, muffled but distinct. The ground-penetrating radar was right. "There's definitely a chamber down here." The voice was male, professional, unfamiliar. "Sterling said the new owner found it today. We need to move fast." Another voice, also male but younger. "What about the family? They're still on the property." "We'll deal with them if necessary. The client wants those documents, and they're paying enough to handle any complications." Rebecca felt Lucas trembling beside her and put a protective arm around both children. Her mind raced through options. They were trapped underground with no cell service and unknown men above, who clearly had no legal right to be there. Then she remembered something. Theodore Hayes had told stories about underground passages. If this chamber existed, might there be other tunnels? Moving carefully in the darkness, she felt along the walls, searching for any irregularity that might indicate another exit. Her fingers found a depression in the stone, and when she pressed, a section of wall pivoted inward. Beyond was another passage, narrow and low, leading away from the main chamber. Without hesitation, she guided Emma and Lucas through the opening, just as flashlight beams began descending the stairs. The passage was tight, forcing them to move single file. Rebecca led, one hand on the damp stone wall, the other holding Lucas's hand while he held Emma's. The tunnel seemed to go on forever, sometimes level, sometimes climbing slightly. Finally, a glimmer of light appeared ahead. They emerged through a cleverly concealed opening behind a massive oak tree nearly a quarter mile from the barn. As they caught their breath, Rebecca pulled out her phone, finally getting a signal, and called 911. Within minutes, police sirens wailed up the drive. The intruders were caught still in the underground chamber, photographing documents. They turned out to be private investigators hired by an international consortium of collectors, the same clients Sterling had mentioned. As state police secured the scene and federal authorities were notified, Rebecca sat with her children on the front porch of their new home, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and reds. The magnitude of what they discovered was only beginning to sink in. "What happens now?" Emma asked, leaning against her mother's shoulder. Rebecca considered the question. In a single day, they'd gone from struggling to find stability to becoming guardians of one of the most significant historical finds in American history. Federal historians would need to authenticate and catalog the documents. Security would have to be established. The property would likely be designated a National Historic Site. "Now," she said finally, "we figure out how to honor this responsibility. Those documents were hidden to protect something important. We need to ensure they're preserved and shared appropriately." "Dad would have loved this," Lucas said quietly. All his talk about family history being important, he was right, wasn't he? Rebecca pulled both children closer. He was right about a lot of things, including believing that sometimes taking a risk for the right reasons leads to extraordinary outcomes. As darkness fell over Cedar Hills, the first stars appearing in the clear Pennsylvania sky, Rebecca thought about the journey that had brought them here. That morning, she'd been a desperate single mother risking everything on a long shot. Tonight, she was the guardian of historical treasures that would reshape understanding of America's founding. The stone house stood solid and protective around them, its walls holding centuries of stories. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, meetings with federal authorities, historians, security experts, and inevitably media attention. But tonight, sitting on the porch with her children, Rebecca felt something she hadn't experienced since David's death. The sense that they were exactly where they were meant to be. In the distance, an owl called across the valley, its voice echoing through the darkness like a messenger from the past. The secrets of Cedar Hills had waited nearly 250 years to be discovered. They could wait one more night while a family began writing its own chapter in the long history of this remarkable place. The next morning arrived with a chaos Rebecca hadn't anticipated. By 7 a.m., news vans lined the gravel drive leading to Cedar Hills, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like mechanical flowers seeking the sun. The discovery of the underground archive had leaked overnight, transforming their quiet farm into the center of a national sensation. Rebecca stood at the kitchen window, coffee mug in hand, watching reporters set up equipment while photographers captured every angle of the historic property. Emma and Lucas sat at the breakfast table behind her, their excitement from yesterday tempered by the overwhelming attention. "There must be 30 vehicles out there," Emma observed, peering over her mother's shoulder. "How did they find out so quickly?" "Police reports are public record," Rebecca explained, though she suspected the leak went deeper. The international collectors who'd hired the intruders clearly had media connections. "We'll need to be very careful about what we say and to whom." The doorbell rang, followed immediately by insistent knocking. Rebecca had disconnected the landline after the 15th call from various news outlets, but that hadn't stopped the more determined journalists from approaching the house directly. "Should I answer it?" Lucas asked, already half rising from his chair. "No, honey, we're not talking to media yet." Rebecca checked her phone, scrolling through dozens of missed calls and messages. Among them was one that made her pause, a text from Marcus Chen, the attorney she'd briefly consulted about the property purchase. His message was simple. "Federal marshals en route. Don't speak to anyone until they arrive. Important meeting at 10 a.m. As if on cue, a convoy of black government SUVs turned into the drive, their presence causing the gathered media to surge forward with renewed interest. Federal agents emerged, creating a perimeter that pushed the reporters back to the property's entrance. "Impressive response time," Rebecca murmured, watching the efficient operation unfold. The lead agent, a tall woman with steel grey hair pulled back in a severe bun, approached the front door. Rebecca opened it before she could knock. "Mrs. Hartley, I'm Special Agent Diana Walsh, National Archives and Records Administration, Office of Inspector General." She displayed her credentials with practiced efficiency. "We need to secure the historical materials you discovered and establish protective protocols for your family. Please come in." Rebecca stepped aside, noting how Agent Walsh's team had already positioned themselves strategically around the property. "I wasn't expecting this level of attention." Walsh's expression softened slightly as she entered the farmhouse. "The documents you found aren't just historically significant, Mrs. Hartley. Based on our preliminary assessment, they may have current legal and diplomatic implications. Several foreign governments have already made inquiries." Foreign governments? Rebecca felt her stomach tighten. "I thought we were dealing with historical documents, not state secrets." The line between history and current affairs is often thinner than people realize, Walsh explained, accepting the coffee Rebecca offered. Colonial-era treaties, land grants, and diplomatic correspondence can still affect modern territorial disputes, water rights, and indigenous claims. Your underground archive appears to contain documents that several nations would very much like to see, or prevent others from seeing. Emma and Lucas had joined them in the living room, listening, with wide eyes as the federal agent outlined the situation. Walsh noticed their presence and adjusted her tone accordingly. "Think of it like finding a time capsule," she told them. "Except instead of old photographs and newspapers, you've discovered papers that might change how we understand important agreements made centuries ago." "Cool," Lucas breathed, then quickly added, "but also kind of scary." "Both reactions are entirely appropriate," Walsh agreed. She turned back to Rebecca. "We need to conduct a full inventory of the archive's contents. The process will take several weeks, possibly months. During that time, we'll need to maintain strict security protocols." Rebecca felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "What does that mean for us? We just moved here. My children have school. I have a farm to establish. Your lives will continue as normally as possible," Walsh assured her. "We'll work around your schedule and try to minimize disruption. However, there will be a constant security presence, and we'll need to implement certain precautions." Before Rebecca could ask what kind of precautions, another vehicle arrived. A pristine black limousine that looked absurdly out of place on the rustic farm. Marcus Chen emerged, briefcase in hand, followed by an elegantly dressed older woman whom Rebecca didn't recognize. "That's our 10 o'clock meeting," Walsh said, checking her watch. "Dr. Eleanor Pierce from the University of Pennsylvania. She's the leading expert on Revolutionary-era documentation and has top-level security clearance for sensitive historical materials." Chen and Dr. Pierce were escorted past the media gauntlet and into the house. The attorney, usually unflappable in his expensive suits, appeared slightly overwhelmed by the federal presence. Dr. Pierce, in contrast, moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to high-stakes situations. "Mrs. Hartley," Chen began after introductions were made, "I've been retained by a coalition of historical preservation societies to ensure your interests are protected during this process. The legal ramifications of your discovery are substantial." Dr. Pierce had barely waited for the pleasantries to end before asking, "May I see the archive? The historical community is buzzing with speculation. If the preliminary reports are accurate, this could be the most significant find since the Dead Sea Scrolls, at least for American history." Rebecca glanced at Agent Walsh, who nodded. "Dr. Pierce has been cleared to assess the collection. Her expertise will be invaluable in determining authenticity and historical context." The group made their way to the stone barn, now cordoned off with yellow tape and guarded by federal agents. The modern research equipment left by the intruders had been catalogued as evidence, but the underground chamber remained untouched. As they descended the stone steps, Dr. Pierce's professional composure cracked. She gasped audibly when the flashlight beams illuminated the vast underground library. "My God," she whispered, "it's real. The Hayes archive actually exists." "You knew about this?" Rebecca asked, surprised by the recognition in Pierce's voice. "Knew about it? My dear, historians have been debating the existence of the Hayes archive for 2 centuries. There were references in letters, mentions in private journals, but no proof. Most of us believed it was a myth, like the lost colony of Roanoke or the Fountain of Youth." Pierce moved to the nearest cabinet with reverent care, her gloved hands trembling as she examined the volumes within. "These journals. The preservation is extraordinary. The Hayes family must have maintained perfect temperature and humidity control." She turned to Rebecca with shining eyes. "Do you understand what you found? This isn't just a collection of old papers. This is the shadow history of America's founding." Over the next several hours, Dr. Pierce conducted a preliminary survey of the archive's contents, while federal agents photographed and documented everything. Rebecca tried to follow the historical significance of various documents, but the sheer scope was overwhelming. Letters between founding fathers discussing secret negotiations, drafts of treaties with Native American tribes that differed significantly from official versions, personal journals revealing the human drama behind pivotal historical moments. "This correspondence between Hamilton and Jefferson," Pierce exclaimed, carefully examining a letter. "It discusses a compromise regarding state debts that historians have only speculated about. And this," she held up another document with trembling hands. "This appears to be Madison's original notes from the closed sessions of the Constitutional Convention. The official records were deliberately incomplete. This fills in the gaps." Agent Walsh interrupted the scholarly excitement with practical concerns. "Dr. Pierce, we need to establish authentication protocols and begin securing these materials. Some of these documents may need to be classified for national security reasons." Pierce's expression hardened. "Agent Walsh, with all due respect, these documents belong to history, not to government bureaucrats who might want to hide inconvenient truths. The American people have a right to understand their real history." "And they will," Walsh replied, "evenly, after proper review to ensure no current national security interests are compromised. We're not in the business of hiding history, Doctor. We're in the business of protecting it." The tension between historical transparency and security concerns would clearly be an ongoing issue. Rebecca felt caught in the middle, legally owning the property but morally responsible for something much larger than personal ownership. As the morning progressed, more officials arrived. Representatives from the State Department, historians from the Smithsonian, lawyers from the Department of Justice. Each new arrival added another layer of complexity to the situation. The farmhouse kitchen became an impromptu conference room where competing interests collided. The French embassy has already filed a formal request to review any documents related to the Louisiana purchase, a State Department official announced. They claim potential irregularities in the original negotiations. The British Museum wants access to anything related to Revolutionary War intelligence operations, another added. They are particularly interested in Benedict Arnold's correspondence. Several Native American tribes have standing legal claims that these documents might affect, the Justice Department lawyer interjected. We need to consider the implications under current treaty law. Rebecca's head spun with the competing demands. She'd bought a farm to grow organic vegetables and provide stability for her children. Instead, she'd stumbled into a historical minefield with international implications. During a brief break in the discussions, she stepped onto the back porch for fresh air. Lucas joined her, his young face creased with worry. "Mom, are we in trouble?" he asked quietly. Rebecca pulled him close. "No, honey, we're not in trouble. We've just found something very important, and now lots of people want to make sure it's handled correctly." "But what about our farm? What about the vegetables you wanted to grow?" The question pierced her heart. In all the excitement and chaos, she'd almost forgotten their original plan. "We'll still have our farm," she assured him. "This changes things, but it doesn't change everything. We'll find a way to make it all work." Emma appeared in the doorway. "Mom, Agent Walsh wants to talk to you about security arrangements, and that Dr. Pierce is arguing with someone from the CIA about document classification. It's getting pretty intense in there." Rebecca sighed, squeezing Lucas's shoulder before heading back inside. The kitchen had indeed become a battleground of competing interests. Dr. Pierce stood toe-to-toe with a stern-faced man in a dark suit, their voices raised. "Academic freedom and historical truth," Pierce was saying. "You can't classify documents that are 250 years old." "We can if they contain information affecting current national security," the CIA representative countered. "Some of these documents reference intelligence methods and foreign relationships that remain sensitive." Agent Walsh intercepted Rebecca before she could be drawn into the argument. "Mrs. Hartley, we need to discuss immediate security measures. Given the international interest in these documents, we're recommending a full protective detail for your family." "Protective detail? You mean bodyguards?" "Federal protection officers," Walsh corrected. "Discreet but constant. There are significant financial interests at stake here, not to mention political ones. Some parties might attempt to pressure you or your children to gain access to the documents." The reality hit Rebecca like a cold wave. She'd not only discovered historical treasures, but had also painted a target on her family. For how long? Until the documents are fully catalogued, authenticated, and secured. Possibly longer, depending on legal challenges and international negotiations. We're looking at months minimum. Rebecca's mind raced through the implications. Emma was supposed to start her junior year at the local high school. Lucas had already researched which middle school clubs he wanted to join. How could they have normal lives with federal agents following them everywhere? "There's another issue," Walsh continued. "The media attention isn't going to diminish. If anything, it will intensify as word spreads about the archive's contents. We recommend a public relations professional to help manage the narrative." "Manage the narrative?" Rebecca almost laughed at the bureaucratic phrasing. "Yesterday I was planning crop rotations. Today I need a PR team?" Walsh's expression softened with something like sympathy. "I understand this is overwhelming, but like it or not, you're now the guardian of one of the most significant historical finds in American history. That comes with responsibilities and, unfortunately, risks. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings, decisions, and revelations. By evening, the farm had been transformed into something resembling a federal compound. Security cameras were being installed, motion sensors lined the perimeter, a temporary command center was established in one of the smaller barns. As the sun set over Cedar Hills, Rebecca found herself alone in the farmhouse for the first time since morning. Emma and Lucas had been taken to town by federal agents to gather personal belongings from their rental house. The sudden quiet felt almost oppressive after the day's chaos. She wandered through the historic rooms, trying to reconcile the morning's simple plans with the afternoon's complex reality. In the library, she paused at the desk, where she'd noticed the strange mounting holes. Now she understood. It had likely held some kind of document sorting or copying mechanism, part of the Hayes family's secret archival work. The sound of footsteps made her turn. Jerry Whitmore stood in the doorway, his weathered face creased with concern. "I let myself in," he said apologetically. "The federal agents know me. Thought you might need a friendly face after today's circus." Rebecca felt tears threaten for the first time all day. "Jerry, what have I gotten my family into?" The old historian crossed to her, his presence reassuring in its familiarity. "You've done nothing wrong, my dear. If anything, you've done something profoundly right. Those documents needed to be found, and they needed to be found by someone. Like you, someone without an agenda beyond truth and fairness. But the complications, the security issues, the international implications, all manageable," Jerry assured her. "Yes, it's overwhelming now, but think about what this means. The real history of our nation's founding, preserved and protected for nearly 250 years, now coming to light. Your children will grow up as part of something extraordinary." Rebecca moved to the window, looking out at the security lights now dotting the property. "Sterling Development knew about the archive. That's why they wanted the property so badly." Jerry nodded. Victoria Sterling's interest went beyond commercial development. Her international clients, they're not just collectors. Some represent foreign governments with old grievances, territorial disputes that these documents might resolve one way or another. "So I've potentially disrupted international relations by buying a farm." "You've potentially brought truth to light," Jerry corrected. "That's always disruptive to those who profit from obscured history." A text alert interrupted their conversation. Emma had sent a photo from their rental house. She and Lucas grinning beside boxes marked kitchen and books, with federal agents visible in the background trying to look inconspicuous. "Your children are handling this remarkably well," Jerry observed, looking at the photo over Rebecca's shoulder. "They're resilient. They've had to be." Rebecca's voice caught slightly. "After David died, I worried constantly about providing stability for them. Now I've thrown them into something that's anything but stable." "On the contrary," Jerry disagreed gently, "you've given them purpose. How many young people get to be part of discovering their nation's true history? Emma and Lucas will have experiences and insights their peers could never imagine." Before Rebecca could respond, her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but the area code was local. "Hello? Mrs. Hartley, this is Samuel Hayes." The voice was elderly but strong. "I believe you've bought my family's ancestral home." Rebecca's breath caught. Theodore Hayes had supposedly died without heirs, leading to the property's abandonment and eventual auction. "Mr. Hayes, I was told there were no surviving family members." A dry chuckle came through the phone. "That's what we wanted people to believe. I'm Theodore's second cousin, twice removed. Been living in California for 40 years. We need to talk about what you've found." "The federal agents are handling everything," Rebecca began, but Hayes interrupted. "Not on the phone. Too many ears. I'm at the Copper Kettle Diner in town. Can you slip away for an hour? Bring the historian Whitmore, he'll vouch for me." Rebecca looked at Jerry, who nodded slowly. "I know Samuel," he confirmed. "Haven't seen him in decades, but yes, he's legitimate Hayes family." An hour later, after negotiating with Agent Walsh and agreeing to take 2 protection officers with her, Rebecca sat in a worn vinyl booth at the Copper Kettle. Samuel Hayes was a thin man in his 80s, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He'd chosen a corner booth that gave him a view of the entire diner. "Thank you for coming," he began without preamble. "I've been watching the news coverage. Quite a sensation you've caused. Mr. Hayes, I had no idea about the archive when I bought the property. If you want to make some claim..." He waved her concerns away. "I have no interest in claiming anything. The property was meant to pass out of our family. You were meant to find the archive." Rebecca blinked in confusion. "Meant to find it?" Samuel leaned forward, lowering his voice. "The Hayes family has guarded that secret for 9 generations. Each generation selected a keeper, someone who knew about the archive and ensured its protection. Theodore was the last official keeper. But he died without passing on the knowledge." "He died without passing it to another Hayes," Samuel corrected. "The documents in that archive, they're not just historical records. They're evidence of agreements, compromises, and secrets that shaped this nation. Some of those secrets were meant to stay buried until the right moment." "And you think this is the right moment?" Samuel's weathered hands wrapped around his coffee cup. Theodore believed the archive should be revealed when America faced a constitutional crisis, a moment when understanding our true origins would be crucial for navigating our future. He started preparing for that revelation 5 years ago. Rebecca's mind raced. The modern equipment in the barn, that was Theodore's doing. He knew he was dying. He also knew that certain international interests were circling, trying to gain control of the archive for their own purposes. So he let the property go into foreclosure, knowing it would eventually go to auction. He believed the right person would be drawn to it. "That's a lot to leave to chance," Rebecca said skeptically. Samuel smiled. "Was it chance that you outbid Sterling Development? Was it chance that Jerry Whitmore was there to support you? Theodore spent years researching potential buyers, looking for someone with the right combination of integrity, intelligence, and courage. Your husband's family connection to the Hartley line was a bonus." The revelation staggered Rebecca. "You're saying my purchase was somehow orchestrated?" "Influenced, perhaps. Theodore couldn't control who would ultimately buy the property, but he could create conditions that favored the right kind of person. The deteriorated state to discourage pure developers, the timing of the auction, even certain rumors spread about the property, all designed to attract someone seeking more than profit." Jerry interjected, "And the Historical Preservation Society's funds?" Samuel nodded. "Theodore established that fund through anonymous donations. He knew whoever bought the property would need financial support to compete with corporate bidders." Rebecca felt the ground shifting beneath her understanding of recent events. Why didn't he just donate the documents to the National Archives? "Because governments have their own agendas," Samuel explained. "The archive contains truths that various parties would prefer to suppress or manipulate. It needed to be discovered by a private citizen, someone without institutional loyalties who could ensure the information became truly public." "That's a tremendous burden to place on someone unknowingly," Rebecca said, anger creeping into her voice. "Yes," Samuel agreed simply, "but necessary. The documents you found will reshape our understanding of American history. They'll affect current legal disputes, challenge established narratives, and possibly alter international relationships. That kind of power couldn't be entrusted to any single institution." Rebecca thought of her children, of the federal agents now stationed around their new home, of the international attention focused on their family. And if I had failed? If Sterling had won the auction? There were contingency plans, Samuel assured her. But Theodore believed you were the best possibility. Your background in sustainable agriculture suggested someone who thinks long-term. Your perseverance after your husband's death showed strength of character. Your children provided motivation to build something lasting. The calculated nature of it all should have made Rebecca furious. Instead, she felt an odd sense of destiny clicking into place. What aren't you telling me? There's more to this than just historical documents. Samuel and Jerry exchanged glances. The archive is extensive, Samuel finally said. What you've seen so far is perhaps a quarter of the total collection. There are other chambers, other passages. The barn chamber was meant to be found first. It contains the least controversial materials. Least controversial? Rebecca almost laughed. We have federal agents, international inquiries, and security details because of the least controversial documents? The deeper archives contain more sensitive materials, Samuel continued carefully. Documents that Theodore believed should only be revealed gradually as the public becomes ready to process their implications. Such as? Samuel hesitated, then spoke quietly. Evidence that some of our most revered founding fathers held beliefs and made agreements that would shock modern sensibilities. Proof that certain historical events unfolded very differently than we've been taught. Records of indigenous treaties that were deliberately hidden because they contradicted manifest destiny narratives. Rebecca absorbed this information, understanding dawning. So I'm not just the owner of a historical archive. I'm the gatekeeper for information that could fundamentally challenge American mythology. Now you understand the magnitude of your responsibility, Samuel confirmed, and why Theodore needed someone unconnected to existing power structures to control the revelation process. The weight of it all threatened to crush Rebecca's resolve. She'd wanted to provide stability for her children, to build a sustainable farm, to create a simple, meaningful life after the chaos of David's death. Instead, she'd inherited a responsibility that would define not just her family's future, but potentially influence national discourse for generations. How do I even begin to handle this? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't have to handle it alone, Jerry assured her. There are scholars, lawyers, and activists who've waited their entire careers for these documents to surface. The key is choosing advisors carefully, avoiding those who would exploit the information for personal or political gain. Samuel reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather journal. This was Theodore's. His notes on the archive, the organization system, and his thoughts on how the information should be revealed. He wanted whoever found the archive to have guidance. Rebecca accepted the journal with trembling hands. The leather was worn smooth with use, the pages filled with neat handwriting. Why didn't you come forward immediately? Why wait until after I'd already found the first chamber? Because you needed to discover it authentically, Samuel explained. The federal authorities, the media, the international observers, they all needed to see this as an accidental discovery by a private citizen. If it appeared orchestrated, various parties would have grounds to challenge your ownership or question the document's authenticity. The strategic thinking behind every element impressed and unsettled Rebecca. Theodore Hayes had played a long game, setting up conditions years in advance to ensure his family's centuries-old secret would be revealed in the most impactful way possible. There's one more thing, Samuel added reluctantly. The Hayes and Hartley families weren't just connected through historical coincidence. There's a specific document in the deeper archives, a letter from George Washington himself, that explains why our families were chosen as guardians of these materials. Your husband's ancestry wasn't just a bonus, it was central to Theodore's selection process. Rebecca stared at him, You're saying David's family was somehow destined to be involved with this? Destined is a strong word, Samuel hedged. Let's say there were historical reasons why a Hartley descendant finding the archive would be particularly significant. When you read Washington's letter, you'll understand. The conversation was interrupted by Agent Walsh appearing at their table. Mrs. Hartley, we need to return to the property. There's been a development. Alarm shot through Rebecca. The children are fine, Walsh assured her quickly. They're back at the house with their protection detail, but we've discovered another chamber entrance, and Dr. Pierce insists you should be present for the opening. The ride back to Cedar Hills was tense with anticipation. Rebecca clutched Theodore's journal, her mind spinning with everything Samuel had revealed. As they turned into the property, she saw that the media presence had doubled, held back at the gate by local police reinforcements. Emma and Lucas waited on the front porch, their excitement barely contained. "Mum, they found another secret room," Lucas exclaimed as she approached. "Dr. Pierce says it's even bigger than the first one." Inside, the farmhouse buzzed with activity. Federal agents had set up communication equipment in the dining room. Historians clustered around laptops displaying architectural surveys. Dr. Pierce stood at the center of it all, her professional composure cracked by barely suppressed enthusiasm. "Mrs. Hartley, perfect timing," she said without preamble. "Ground penetrating. Radar has revealed a second chamber beneath the main house, accessed through the cellar. We believe it connects to a tunnel system that links multiple underground storage areas." Rebecca thought of Samuel's words about deeper archives containing more sensitive materials. "Have you opened it yet?" "We were waiting for you," Pierce replied. "As the property owner, you have the right to be present for each new discovery. Besides," she added with a knowing look, "I suspect you might have insights about what we'll find." The cellar of the farmhouse was old, with stone walls that predated the American Revolution. Federal agents had already cleared away decades of accumulated storage to reveal the original foundation. In one corner, what had appeared to be solid stone showed seams suggesting a hidden door. "The mechanism is ingenious," one of the agents explained, pointing to a series of stones that were slightly different in color. "Press them in the correct sequence, and the door should open. We've identified the pattern, but wanted you present before activating it." Rebecca stepped forward, Theodore's journal heavy in her bag. She thought of the generations who had guarded these secrets, of the weight they'd carried, knowing what lay hidden beneath their feet. With a nod to the waiting team, she pressed the stones in sequence. The wall section swung inward silently, revealing stairs carved from living rock that descended into darkness. Cool air rushed up, carrying that now familiar scent of old paper and preserved time. Unlike the barn chamber, these stairs were narrower, older, their walls marked with colonial-era tool marks. The descent felt like traveling back through time. At the bottom, they entered a chamber that dwarfed the barn archive. Vaulted ceilings soared overhead, supported by columns carved from bedrock. Along the walls stretched cabinets, shelves, and display cases containing not just documents, but artifacts, maps, navigational instruments, personal effects of historical figures. Dr. Pierce moved forward reverently, her flashlight beam catching. Gilded lettering on leather spines, illuminated manuscripts under glass, and what appeared to be original paintings of founding fathers. "This isn't just an archive," she breathed. "It's a museum, a secret museum of American origins." But it was the central feature that drew everyone's attention. A massive table, clearly custom-built for the space, held what appeared to be architectural plans, not for buildings, but for a nation. Documents were arranged in careful sequence, showing the evolution of governmental structure from initial concepts through multiple revisions to final form. "The Constitutional Convention's working papers," Pierce whispered. The real ones, not the sanitized version released to the public, but the actual debates, the rejected proposals, the compromised documents that show how our government was really designed. Rebecca approached the table, drawn by an instinct she couldn't name. Among the carefully arranged documents, one stood out, a letter bearing George Washington's distinctive handwriting, addressed to the future guardian of these truths. With trembling hands, she lifted the protective glass and read, "To whomever discovers this archive in America's time of need, know that what you have found was hidden not from shame, but from prudence. The birth of our nation required compromises that would horrify future generations, alliances that contradicted our stated principles, and decisions that prioritized survival over ideological purity. These documents tell the complete story, not the myth we needed to inspire a revolution, but the reality of flawed men attempting something unprecedented. We were not the demigods history would make us, but pragmatists wrestling with impossible choices. The Hayes and Hartley families were chosen as guardians because they alone among our supporters understood that truth serves democracy better than mythology, even when that truth is uncomfortable. Their descendants carry the responsibility of revealing these materials when America has matured enough to handle the complete story of its origins. If you are reading this, that time has come. Use these truths wisely, for they have the power to either strengthen our republic through honest understanding or tear it apart through disillusionment. May Providence guide your choices as it guided ours. G. Washington, 1799. The letter fell from Rebecca's numb fingers as the full weight of her inheritance crashed over her. She owned not just property, but responsibility for reshaping national narrative. The simple farm she'd hoped to build had become ground zero for a historical reckoning that would challenge every American's understanding of their country's origins. Looking around the chamber at the waiting faces, federal agents, historians, her own children, Rebecca understood that her life had irrevocably changed. The journey that had started with a widow's desperate bid at a farm auction had led to a moment that would ripple through American consciousness for generations. And according to Theodore Hayes's careful planning, she was exactly where she needed to be. The morning after discovering Washington's letter, Rebecca woke to find federal agents installing sophisticated climate control systems throughout both underground chambers. The property had transformed overnight into something resembling a classified research facility, with technicians in hazmat suits carefully extracting documents for preservation and analysis. Dr. Pierce had established a makeshift laboratory in the largest barn, where a team of conservators worked to stabilize the most fragile materials. Rebecca watched through the window as they delicately separated pages that had been pressed together for centuries, each movement precise and reverent. Mrs. Hartley, Agent Walsh approached with a secure satellite phone. "The President's Chief of Staff would like to speak with you." Rebecca's stomach clenched. In the chaos of the past 24 hours, she hadn't fully processed that her discovery would reach the highest levels of government. She accepted the phone with unsteady hands. "Mrs. Hartley, this is Patricia Kellerman," came a crisp voice. "The President has been briefed on your discovery. He's asked me to convey his personal appreciation for your cooperation with federal authorities." "Of course," Rebecca managed, unsure of proper protocol for speaking with White House staff. "He's also asked me to inform you that he'll be visiting Cedar Hills tomorrow. This isn't a public event. The press won't be notified. He wants to see the archives personally and discuss their implications with you directly." The phone nearly slipped from Rebecca's grasp. "The President is coming here?" "Yes. Secret Service advance teams are already en route. I understand this is overwhelming, but the President feels it's crucial to establish a direct relationship given the sensitive nature of these materials." He'll be accompanied by a small group of constitutional scholars and security advisors. After the call ended, Rebecca stood in her kitchen, trying to reconcile her old life with this new reality. Emma entered, still in pajamas, holding her laptop. "Mom, we're trending on social media worldwide. There are historians live streaming analyses of what little information has leaked. Some are calling it the most significant historical discovery since King Tut's tomb." Rebecca sank into a chair. "The president is coming tomorrow." Emma's eyes widened. "Like the actual president. Here." "Apparently our founding fathers' secrets warrant executive attention," Rebecca replied, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "Where's your brother?" "With Dr. Pierce in the barn. She's teaching him about document preservation. He's fascinated by the whole process." Emma paused, studying her mother's face. "Are you okay? You look overwhelmed." "I am overwhelmed," Rebecca admitted. 3 days ago, our biggest concern was getting the harvest in before the storm. Now we're at the center of a historical revelation that could reshape how Americans view their country. Emma sat beside her, wisdom beyond her years showing in her expression. "Dad always said the Hartley family was connected to important historical moments. Maybe this is our moment." Through the window, Rebecca could see Lucas emerging from the barn with Dr. Pierce, his face animated as he gestured excitedly about something. Despite everything, her children were adapting to their extraordinary circumstances with remarkable resilience. The rest of the morning was consumed by security preparations for the presidential visit. Secret Service agents conducted thorough sweeps of every building, installed additional surveillance equipment, and established multiple perimeter checkpoints. The somber efficiency of their work drove home the gravity of what Rebecca had uncovered. Marcus Chen arrived just after noon, accompanied by a team of lawyers Rebecca hadn't met before. They commandeered the dining room, spreading contracts and legal documents across the table. "Mrs. Hartley, we need to discuss the legal framework for managing these historical materials," Chen began. "The federal government is asserting various claims, and we need to protect your interests while ensuring proper preservation and access." "What kind of claims?" Rebecca asked, though she'd expected this complication. "They're invoking national security statutes, historical preservation, laws, and even some obscure colonial-era treaties. It's a legal maze, but we believe we can negotiate an arrangement that maintains your ownership while allowing federal oversight of sensitive materials." Rebecca studied the documents, dense with legal terminology that made her head spin. "What are my actual options here?" Chen's expression was sympathetic but frank. "Realistically, you can cooperate with a negotiated agreement, or they'll likely seize the materials under national security provisions. The good news is they seem inclined to work with you rather than against you. The president's visit suggests they want you as an ally, not an adversary. And if some of these documents challenge official narratives or reveal uncomfortable truths, that's where it gets complicated," Chen admitted. "There will be pressure to manage the release of information to contextualize revelations. That might prove disturbing. Your role as a private citizen actually provides some protection. You're not bound by the same restrictions as government employees." Before Rebecca could respond, commotion erupted outside. Through the window, she saw a convoy of black SUVs arriving, disgorging what appeared to be an entire diplomatic delegation. Agent Walsh appeared at the dining room entrance. "Mrs. Hartley, we have representatives from 12 foreign governments requesting access to the archives. The State Department is attempting to manage the situation, but they're insisting on speaking with you directly." Rebecca felt the walls closing in. 12 governments? What could they possibly want? "Various historical claims," Walsh explained. "The French are interested in documents related to the Louisiana Purchase. The British want materials about Revolutionary War negotiations. The Spanish have questions about Florida territorial agreements. Several Native American nations are asserting treaty rights. It's becoming a diplomatic nightmare. Chen stood. As Mrs. Hartley's attorney, I must insist that all communication go through proper legal channels. She's a private citizen, not a diplomat. Walsh nodded. Understood. But the pressure isn't going away. Some of these governments are threatening legal action in international courts. The afternoon brought a parade of officials, each with competing agendas. State Department. Lawyers argued for diplomatic sensitivity. Pentagon representatives worried about documents revealing intelligence methods. Smithsonian curators pushed for complete public access. Native American tribal lawyers demanded immediate review of treaty documents. Through it all, Rebecca felt like a small boat tossed between massive waves. She'd wanted to save her family's financial future, to build something lasting for her children. Instead, she'd become the reluctant guardian of secrets that powerful forces wanted to control or suppress. As evening approached, Jerry Whitmore arrived carrying a box of old photographs and yellowed newspapers. His presence felt like an anchor in the storm of official demands. Thought these might help, he said, setting the box on the coffee table. Articles from the last time someone tried to expose parts of this archive, back in 1932, might give you some perspective on what you're facing. Rebecca examined the old newspapers. Headlines screamed about revolutionary revelations and founding fathers' secret papers. But within weeks, the stories had disappeared, replaced by Depression-era economic news. What happened? She asked. The documents were declared forgeries, Jerry explained. The man who found them, a Hayes family servant, was discredited. Historians who tried to authenticate the papers found their careers destroyed. The whole thing was buried so effectively that most people forgot it ever happened. And you think the same thing could happen now? Harder to do in the internet age, Jerry admitted. But the forces that want to control historical narrative haven't disappeared. They've just gotten more sophisticated. That evening, after the officials had departed and the children were in bed, Rebecca sat alone in the library, reading Theodore Hayes's journal by lamplight. His careful notes revealed a man torn between duty to preserve truth and fear of its consequences. The archive contains proof that would shatter America's mythical self-image, one entry read. Evidence that our revolution was funded by foreign powers with their own agendas. Documents showing that slavery wasn't just tolerated, but was deliberately protected by secret constitutional provisions. Letters revealing that Manifest Destiny was orchestrated through deliberate deception and broken treaties. Rebecca turned the page, finding a more recent entry. I've watched our country tear itself apart over false narratives and manufactured divisions. Perhaps the truth, however painful, would serve us better than the comfortable lies we've built our identity upon. But do I have the right to make that choice for an entire nation? She closed the journal, understanding Theodore's burden more deeply. The next morning, she would meet the President of the United States. He would want to know her intentions, would try to shape how these revelations emerged. The weight of history pressed down upon her. Her phone buzzed with a text from Emma. Can't sleep, coming downstairs. Moments later, her daughter appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket. She curled up in the opposite chair, studying her mother's face. You're scared, Emma observed. Terrified, Rebecca admitted. I'm a widow who grows vegetables, not a guardian of national secrets. How did we end up here? Maybe because you're exactly who should be making these decisions, Emma suggested. You don't have political agendas or corporate interests. You just want what's best for your family and community. Isn't that what the founders were supposed to represent? Regular people trying to build something better? Rebecca felt tears threaten. Her daughter's simple faith touched something deep within her. When did you get so wise? Watching you, Emma replied. After Dad died, you could have given up. Instead, you kept fighting for us, kept believing in better possibilities. That's what this is really about, isn't it? Fighting for truth, even when it's hard. They sat in comfortable silence, mother and daughter sharing a moment of connection. Amid the chaos, outside, security lights swept across the grounds as federal agents maintained their vigilant watch. Whatever tomorrow brought, Rebecca knew she wouldn't face it alone. The next morning arrived gray and drizzly, fitting weather for a day that would likely reshape American historical understanding. Secret Service agents had transformed the property into a secure compound, with snipers positioned on the barn roofs and communications equipment filling the previously quiet farmyard. Rebecca dressed carefully in her best outfit, a simple navy suit she'd worn to job interviews before. Lucas and Emma flanked her at the breakfast table, both unusually quiet as they processed the surreal reality of hosting the president. Remember, Rebecca told them, no matter what happens today, we stick together. We make decisions as a family. The presidential motorcade arrived precisely at 10 a.m., a procession of armored vehicles that seemed almost absurd against the pastoral backdrop. Rebecca stood on the front porch with her children, Agent Walsh nearby for protocol guidance. The president emerged from his limousine with an informality that surprised Rebecca. He was smaller in person than television suggested, his face showing the strain of office, but his eyes sharp with intelligence. He climbed the porch steps with an extended hand. "Mrs. Hartley," he said warmly, "thank you for allowing this intrusion. I know the past few days have been overwhelming." "Mr. President," Rebecca replied, proud that her voice remained steady, "these are my children, Emma and Lucas." The president shook their hands with genuine attention, asking Lucas about his historical interests and complimenting Emma on a school science project he'd somehow been briefed about. His charm was practiced but effective, putting them slightly more at ease. "I understand you've been studying the Revolutionary period," the president said to Lucas. "What do you think of your family's discovery?" Lucas straightened, his natural shyness battling with enthusiasm. "I think the truth is always important, sir, even when it's complicated or uncomfortable. That's what my dad taught us." The president's expression grew thoughtful. "Your father sounds like a wise man. I wish I could have met him." He turned to Rebecca. "Shall we look at these documents that have everyone so stirred up?" They descended into the main chamber, now brilliantly lit with professional equipment. The president moved slowly along the displays, reading excerpts with intense focus. His entourage, a mix of historians, security advisors, and political staff, spread out behind him. "Remarkable preservation," he murmured, studying a letter between Adams and Jefferson. "These provide context that transforms our understanding of early political divisions." He paused at Washington's letter to future guardians, reading it twice. He knew, didn't he, that mythology would replace memory, that future generations would need heroes more than humans. Rebecca found her voice. "What happens now, Mr. President? These documents will challenge everything Americans believe about their origins." The president turned from the displays, his expression grave. "That's what I came to discuss. These materials are too important to suppress. Attempting that would be both wrong and futile in today's connected world, but their release needs to be managed carefully." "Managed how?" Rebecca asked, hearing the edge in her own voice. "Released gradually, with proper historical context. We're proposing a joint commission, government historians, independent scholars, and representatives. You choose to oversee the process. Full transparency, but with careful consideration of impact." One of his advisors, a sharp-faced woman Rebecca recognized as the National Security Advisor, interjected, "Some documents may need to remain classified for security reasons." "Which documents?" Rebecca challenged. The ones that embarrass current policies, that reveal our democratic ideals, were compromised from the start. The president raised a hand, forestalling his advisor's response. Mrs. Hartley, I understand your concerns. Let me be frank. These documents will reshape how we understand American democracy. They'll reveal that our founders were more pragmatic than principled, that they made deals we'd find reprehensible today. Some people will use these revelations to attack our institutions, and others might use them to build better ones, Rebecca countered. A smile played at the president's lips. Theodore Hayes chose his guardian well. You're right, of course. Truth serves democracy better than mythology, even when that truth is painful. They moved to the second chamber beneath the house, where even more sensitive materials were stored. Here the documents told darker stories. Secret agreements with foreign powers, evidence of deliberate genocide against native peoples presented as manifest destiny, correspondence revealing that some founders viewed democracy as a temporary expedient until proper aristocracy could be established. Jesus, whispered one of the historians, reading a Madison letter about deliberately limiting voting rights. This contradicts everything we teach about democratic intentions. The president studied a treaty with native tribes, his face troubled. Broken before the ink dried, and they knew it when they signed it. He looked at Rebecca. These revelations will cause pain to many communities. The truth often does, Rebecca replied, but don't those communities deserve to know what really happened to their ancestors? The National Security Advisor stepped forward again. Mr. President, we need to consider international implications. Some of these documents affect current treaty obligations, territorial disputes. I'm aware. The president cut her off. He turned back to Rebecca. What would you do if the choice were yours alone? Rebecca thought of Theodore Hayes's journal, of his decades of wrestling with the same question. I'd trust the American people. Release everything, but with context. Let historians explain, let people debate and process. Our democracy is strong enough for truth. And if it isn't, the advisor pressed, then it needs to become stronger, Emma said suddenly from where she'd been quietly observing. Everyone turned to look at the teenager. We learned in school that America is an experiment. Experiments require honest data, not wishful thinking. The president smiled genuinely for the first time. From the mouths of babes, he murmured. He made a decision visibly, his shoulders straightening. Very well, full release, managed but not censored. We'll establish the commission as proposed, with Mrs. Hartley having veto power over any proposed redactions. His advisors exchanged alarmed glances, but the president's tone brooked no argument. This nation was born from revolution against concealed power. We won't betray that heritage by becoming what we rebelled against. The rest of the visit was consumed by practical discussions, security arrangements, timeline for releases, composition of the Oversight Commission. Rebecca found herself appointed as civilian chair with a government salary and staff to support her new role. As the president prepared to leave, he drew Rebecca aside. You've accepted an enormous burden. There will be pressure from Congress, from foreign governments, from interest groups of every stripe. My administration will support you, but politics is fickle. Future administrations might not be as cooperative. I understand, Rebecca said, though the full implications still felt abstract. Do you? The president's eyes were knowing. You're about to become one of the most influential people in America, the keeper of our national conscience. That's not a comfortable position. After the motorcade departed, Rebecca stood in her farmyard, trying to process the morning's events. Federal agents were already setting up permanent facilities, a security command post, document processing center, communication hub. Her simple farm was becoming a historical site of national importance. Lucas joined her, slipping his small hand into hers. Are we still going to grow vegetables? Rebecca laughed, surprising herself. Yes, sweetheart, we're still farmers. We're just farming truth now, alongside tomatoes. That evening, as news of the president's visit leaked to media outlets, Rebecca's phone exploded with calls. Reporters, historians, documentary filmmakers, all wanting exclusive access to the woman who controlled America's hidden history. She turned off the phone, gathering her children for dinner at their kitchen table. "Everything changes now," she told them honestly. "Our lives will be public, complicated, sometimes difficult. But we have something important to do. Help our country understand its real history, not the simplified version in textbooks." "Dad would be proud," Lucas said quietly. "He would," Rebecca agreed, feeling David's absence like a physical ache. He believed in truth, even when it was inconvenient. Outside, security lights swept across grounds that had hosted presidents and would soon welcome scholars from around the world. The underground chambers waited, filled with documents that would rewrite textbooks and challenge national myths. Rebecca thought of Washington's letter, his warning about truth's power to either strengthen or shatter. Tomorrow would begin the process of finding out which outcome America would choose. Tonight, though, she was just a mother sharing dinner with her children, holding tight to family even as history swirled around them. The first document was scheduled for release in a week, a relatively mild letter between Hamilton and Jefferson about financial policy. But Rebecca had read ahead, knew what revelations lay deeper in the archive. The real tests would come later, when Americans learned that their cherished origin stories were often carefully crafted fictions. She looked at her children, drawing strength from their presence. Whatever storms lay ahead, they would weather them together. The truth was about to have its day, centuries delayed, but finally arriving. And a widow who'd simply wanted to buy. A farm would shepherd that truth into the light, guided by nothing more than conscience and courage. In the distance, thunder rolled across the Pennsylvania hills, as if nature itself recognized the momentous changes beginning at Cedar Hills Farm. The storm was coming, but Rebecca Hartley stood ready to meet it, guardian of secrets too long hidden and truths too important to bury again. 6 months after the president's visit, Cedar Hills Farm bore little resemblance to the struggling property Rebecca had purchased at auction. The weathered stone buildings now housed state-of-the-art preservation facilities, while the surrounding fields hosted both thriving organic crops and a steady stream of international scholars. The transformation was complete, yet somehow the essence of the place, its connection to the land and to history, remained intact. Rebecca stood in the restored farmhouse kitchen, morning coffee in hand, reviewing the day's schedule on her tablet. The first major document release was set for noon, a collection of letters that would fundamentally challenge the accepted narrative of the Constitutional Convention. After months of preparation, authentication, and careful contextualization, the moment of truth had arrived. Emma entered, already dressed for the press conference in a professional outfit that made her look older than her 16 years. The past months had transformed her from a typical teenager into a poised young woman who could discuss historical documentation with PhD scholars. "The protesters are already gathering at the gate," Emma reported, pouring her own coffee with practiced ease. The patriotic truth defenders on one side, the full transparency now group on the other. Security has them separated, but it's getting loud. Rebecca sighed. The document releases had polarized public opinion in ways she hadn't fully anticipated. Some Americans embraced the revelations about their founders' human complexities, while others saw the historical corrections as attacks on national identity. Cedar Hills had become ground zero for a cultural battle about American mythology versus historical reality. "Where's your brother?" Rebecca asked. "In the archive with Dr. Pierce. They're making final preparations for today's release." He's created an interactive digital presentation that connects the newly revealed documents with previously known history. Dr. Pierce says it's graduate-level work. Pride warmed Rebecca's chest. Lucas had flourished in their new reality. His natural curiosity finding perfect expression in the historical work surrounding them. At 12, he was already being courted by prestigious academic programs. The secure phone rang, the direct line established for government communications. Rebecca recognized the number. Senator Patricia Hawthorne, chair of the Senate Committee on Historical Oversight. "Good morning, Senator," Rebecca answered, steeling herself for what had become a weekly battle. "Mrs. Hartley, I'll be direct. We've received credible threats related to today's document release. The FBI believes extremist groups may attempt to disrupt the proceedings. I'm calling to suggest a postponement." Rebecca felt her jaw tighten. This was the third such suggestion in as many weeks, always couched in security concerns, but clearly aimed at delaying or softening the impact of controversial revelations. "Senator, we've implemented every security recommendation from federal authorities. The documents have been verified, contextualized, and reviewed by the Oversight Committee. Further delays would only fuel conspiracy theories and undermine public trust." A pause on the line, then Hawthorne's voice turned harder. "Some of us believe public trust might be better served by a more selective approach to these releases. The letters you're revealing today paint several founders as financial opportunists who saw the revolution as a business venture. Is that really necessary for public consumption?" "It's necessary for public understanding," Rebecca countered. "We can't build genuine patriotism on false foundations. Americans deserve to know their real history, not a sanitized version that serves political agendas." "You're playing with fire, Mrs. Hartley. These revelations are being weaponized by America's enemies, used to undermine our global standing." "The truth isn't a weapon, Senator. It's a foundation. And our global standing should rest on honesty, not mythology." After ending the call, Rebecca found herself gripping the counter, knuckles white with tension. The political pressure had intensified with each document release, as established narratives crumbled under historical evidence. Some called her a hero of transparency. Others branded her a traitor to American ideals. Agent Walsh appeared in the doorway, her expression concerned. "Ma'am, we need to review security protocols one final time. The threat level has been elevated." They spent the next hour walking through evacuation procedures and emergency responses. The casual farmhouse atmosphere had long since given way. To the reality of their situation, Cedar Hills was now a fortress of historical truth, defended against those who preferred comfortable lies. By 11 o'clock, invited journalists, historians, and dignitaries began arriving. Rebecca watched from her office window as they passed through security checkpoints, their excitement palpable even from a distance. Today's release included correspondence between Alexander Hamilton and various European banking interests, revealing the financial machinations behind America's founding in stark, sometimes unflattering detail. A knock at her door interrupted her observations. Samuel Hayes entered, leaning heavily on his cane, but his eyes still sharp with intelligence. Over the months, he'd become an invaluable advisor, helping Rebecca navigate the complex web of historical secrets his family had guarded. "Nervous?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Terrified," Rebecca admitted. "Today's documents will shatter the image of several founding fathers. Hamilton especially comes across as complicated." "Human," Samuel corrected gently. "They were all human, with human motivations mixing principle with self-interest. That's what makes their achievements more remarkable, not less. They created something transcendent despite their personal flaws." "Tell that to the people burning me in effigy outside the gates," Samuel chuckled. Theodore predicted this. He wrote that revealing truth would be like performing surgery on the national consciousness, painful but necessary for healing. Before Rebecca could respond, Lucas burst in, his face flushed with excitement. "Mom, you need to see this. We found something in the Hamilton letters, a reference to another archive." Rebecca followed her son to the main research facility, where Dr. Pierce waited with barely contained enthusiasm. On the large display screen was a letter in Hamilton's distinctive handwriting. "Look here," Pierce pointed to a specific passage. "Hamilton mentions the secondary collection maintained by our northern friends. He's referring to documents stored separately from the main archive, possibly in New York or Boston." Rebecca studied the text, her mind racing. "You think there are more hidden archives?" "It makes sense," Lucas interjected. "The founders were paranoid about security. They wouldn't have kept all sensitive documents in one location." "The implications," staggered Rebecca. 6 months into revealing one archive's contents, and now they faced the possibility of others. The work of historical revelation might extend far beyond what anyone had imagined. "We'll need to research this carefully," she decided. "But not today. We have enough complexity to manage with the current release." The press conference was held in the renovated barn that now served as Cedar Hills' public presentation space. Cameras from major networks lined the back wall, while rows of seats held scholars, journalists, and carefully selected members of the public. Secret Service agents stood at strategic points, their presence a reminder of the event's significance. Rebecca approached the podium, her prepared remarks steady in her hands, despite internal trembling. In the front row sat her children, their presence anchoring her to what truly mattered. Behind them, the Oversight Committee, a mix of government officials and independent historians, waited to provide context for the revelations. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system. 6 months ago, I stood on this property as a widowed mother hoping to build a simple farm. Today, I stand as the custodian of truths that reshape our understanding of American origins." She paused, scanning the expectant faces. "The documents we're releasing today challenge conventional narratives about our nation's founding. They reveal financial arrangements, personal motivations, and backroom deals that complicate our image of the founders as purely principled patriots." A murmur ran through the audience. Rebecca continued, her confidence growing. "Some will see these revelations as attacks on American greatness. I see them differently. Understanding that our founders were complex humans driven by both ideals and self-interest makes their achievements more remarkable, not less." She clicked the remote, bringing up the first document on the large screen. This letter from Alexander Hamilton to Dutch bankers in 1789 reveals the financial engineering behind our early republic. Hamilton, often celebrated as a financial genius, was also personally invested in many of the schemes he promoted as public policy. Gasps arose from several historians who had never seen the unredacted version. Rebecca walked them through document after document, each revelation peeling back layers of myth-making to expose the raw human drama of nation-building. One letter showed Hamilton negotiating personal commissions from foreign loans he arranged for the federal government. Another revealed his plans to use government debt to enrich specific private interests, including his own associates. The documents painted a picture of a brilliant but ethically flexible operator who blurred lines between public service and private gain. This correspondence, Rebecca continued, displaying a particularly damning exchange, shows Hamilton deliberately structuring the national bank to benefit wealthy speculators at the expense of small farmers and merchants. He justified this as necessary for national stability, but his private letters reveal more self-serving motives. The room buzzed with reaction. Some historians nodded knowingly, having suspected such arrangements from circumstantial evidence. Others appeared genuinely shocked by the blatant nature of the revealed corruption. Dr. Pierce stepped forward to provide historical context. These documents don't negate Hamilton's genuine contributions to American financial systems, she explained. Rather, they show how personal interest and public service intertwined in ways we might find troubling today. Questions erupted from the press corps. Rebecca fielded them calmly, having anticipated most concerns during months of preparation. "Aren't you destroying American heroes?" one journalist challenged. "I'm revealing American humans," Rebecca replied. "Heroes are often invented to serve later agendas. Understanding our founders as real people, flawed, complex, sometimes contradictory, allows us to learn from their actual experiences rather than fictional narratives." Another reporter pressed harder. "Some argue these revelations will weaken American democracy by undermining faith in our institutions." Rebecca's response came from deep conviction. Democracy isn't weakened by truth, it's weakened by lies that eventually crumble. If our institutions can't withstand historical accuracy, they need reform, not protection through mythology. The questions continued for an hour, ranging from scholarly inquiries about specific documents to broader challenges about the project's impact on national identity. Through it all, Rebecca maintained her composure, drawing strength from her children's supportive presence and her conviction that truth served democracy better than fiction. As the press conference concluded, Rebecca noticed a disturbance near the entrance. Security agents were restraining a man who had attempted to rush the stage, shouting about protecting American heritage from historical terrorists. The incident passed quickly, but it underscored the passionate reactions their work provoked. Later that evening, as cleanup crews dismantled the press conference setup, Rebecca walked through the archive with Samuel Hayes. The old man moved slowly among the carefully preserved documents, his expression thoughtful. "You handled that beautifully," he observed. "Theodore would be proud. He always believed the American people could handle truth if it was presented with context and compassion." "The reactions worry me," Rebecca admitted. "We're not even to the most controversial documents yet. What happens when we reveal the Founding Fathers' private views on slavery, the evidence of deliberate genocide against native peoples, the documents showing some founders opposed democracy itself?" Samuel stopped walking, turning to face her directly. "Those revelations will indeed cause pain, but consider the alternative. A nation built on lies eventually collapses when those lies are exposed. By revealing truth gradually, with care and context, you're allowing America to process its real history rather than having it weaponized by others." They paused before a case containing letters between Jefferson and Adams, scheduled for release the following month. The correspondence revealed their private doubts about democracy's sustainability, their fear that common people lacked the education for self-governance. "Every nation mythologizes its origins," Samuel continued, "but America has taken it to extremes, creating secular saints from flawed politicians. The gap between myth and reality has become a chasm. You're building bridges across that chasm." Rebecca touched the glass case gently. "Some days I wonder if we should have left it all buried. The Pandora's box metaphor feels very real." "Pandora's box also contained hope," Samuel reminded her. "By choosing truth over mythology, you're demonstrating faith in American resilience. That's the most patriotic act possible." As they prepared to leave the archive, Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus Chen. "International Court of Justice has rejected the French petition to block document releases. Your legal position remains strong." The message reminded Rebecca of the ongoing international pressure. Several European nations had attempted legal maneuvers to prevent release of documents affecting their historical claims or reputations. So far, American courts had sided with transparency, but the battles continued. Back at the farmhouse, Rebecca found Emma and Lucas in the kitchen preparing dinner, a normal family moment amid extraordinary circumstances. They'd maintained this ritual throughout the chaos, cooking together at least 3 nights a week. "How are you both holding up?" Rebecca asked, joining them at the stove. "The kids at school are weird about it," Lucas admitted, stirring a pot of pasta sauce. "Some think it's cool that we're famous. Others say we're destroying America." Emma added vegetables to a salad bowl. "I've stopped reading the online comments. Too many death threats mixed with the supportive messages." Rebecca's heart ached for the burden her children carried. "We can still stop," she offered, not for the first time. "The government would gladly classify everything and return us to anonymous life." Both children turned to her with identical expressions of determination. "No way," Emma said firmly. "What we're doing matters. Democracy requires informed citizens, not comfortable myths." "Besides," Lucas added with a grin, "I'm learning more history than any kid in America. Why would I want to stop?" Their resilience amazed Rebecca daily. The shy, grieving children who'd accompanied her to that fateful auction had transformed into confident young people engaged with the world's most pressing questions about truth, identity, and national purpose. After dinner, they settled in the living room for their evening tradition, reading and discussing documents scheduled for future release. Tonight's selections focused on the founders' correspondence about slavery, perhaps the most emotionally charged materials in the archive. "This letter from Washington to Lafayette," Emma read aloud. "He admits slavery is morally indefensible, but argues it's economically necessary for the new nation's survival. He actually proposes a gradual phase-out over 50 years. Which never happened," Lucas noted bitterly. "Political convenience trumped moral principle." Rebecca guided the discussion carefully. Understanding these compromises helps explain how slavery became so entrenched despite rhetorical commitment to equality. The founders weren't uniquely evil. They were humans trapped between ideals and practical pressures. "But knowing this," Emma pressed, "how do we honor what they created while acknowledging their moral failures?" It was the central question Rebecca faced daily. We honor them by building on their best ideas while correcting their worst mistakes. The Constitution they created included mechanisms for change. They knew they weren't perfect. The conversation continued late into the evening, ranging across historical periods and moral principles. These family discussions had become Rebecca's favorite part of their new life, watching her children wrestle with complex ideas that would shape their generation's understanding of American identity. As the children headed to bed, Rebecca remained in the living room, reviewing security reports for the next day. The threat level remained high, with various groups planning protests and counter-protests. Some celebrated their work as essential truth-telling, others condemned it as historical vandalism. Her laptop chimed with an encrypted message from Dr. Pierce. "Authentication complete on the Northern Archive references. Hamilton's letters point to a substantial document collection in Boston. Recommend investigation after current releases stabilize." Rebecca stared at the message, mind reeling. Another archive meant more revelations, more controversy, more pressure on her family. Yet the historian in her, awakened by months of working with these materials, felt excited by the possibility of additional discoveries. The phone rang, displaying an international number. Rebecca answered cautiously, accustomed to strange calls at odd hours. "Mrs. Hartley, this is Professor Yoshida from Tokyo University. I'm calling about the Japanese documents referenced in Hamilton's correspondence with Dutch merchants. We believe they may relate to early trade negotiations that could affect current territorial disputes." Rebecca rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. Professor, I appreciate your interest, but we haven't even confirmed the existence of a secondary archive yet. Ah, but you will, Yoshida replied confidently. History has momentum, Mrs. Hartley. Once truth begins emerging, it cannot be stopped. We would like to offer our assistance in locating and preserving any Pacific-related documents. After ending the call, Rebecca walked to the window overlooking the now secured grounds of Cedar Hills. Floodlights illuminated the heritage vegetable gardens she'd managed to plant between security installations, a small victory for normalcy amid the extraordinary. In the distance, she could see the lights of the overnight security detail, federal agents maintaining constant vigilance against those who would destroy or steal the documents that challenged comfortable national myths. The irony wasn't lost on her, the government protecting documents that often embarrassed that same government. Her reflection in the window showed a woman transformed by responsibility. The desperate widow who'd risked everything on a farm auction had become a guardian of historical truth, a role that brought both purpose and peril. Some days, she barely recognized herself. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Agent Walsh entered, carrying a folder marked Confidential. Sorry to disturb you, ma'am, but we've intercepted communications suggesting a coordinated effort to discredit tomorrow's document release. Several media outlets are preparing stories questioning the authenticity of the Hamilton letters, despite extensive verification. Rebecca wasn't surprised. Each release faced similar challenges, attempts to muddy waters, create doubt, deflect from uncomfortable truths. Let me guess, they'll claim the documents are elaborate forgeries? That's the primary angle, Walsh confirmed. They're bringing in handwriting experts who've never actually examined the originals, historians with known political biases, and various conspiracy theorists. It's a sophisticated disinformation campaign. Who's funding it? Walsh hesitated. The money trails are complex, but they lead back to interests threatened by historical transparency, certain political action committees, heritage organizations with mythologized versions of history to protect, and international groups with territorial claims that these documents might affect. Rebecca accepted the folder, scanning the intelligence reports within. The opposition to their work was well-funded and strategically orchestrated, yet public support remained strong, especially among younger Americans who seemed less invested in maintaining fictional narratives. We stay the course, she decided. Truth has survived. Worse attacks than this. After Walsh departed, Rebecca made her final rounds of the house, checking locks and alarm systems, habits developed over months of living under threat. In Lucas's room, she found him asleep with a book about the Constitutional Convention open. On his chest, she gently removed it, smiling at the margin notes in his careful handwriting. Emma's light was still on. Rebecca knocked softly and entered to find her daughter video chatting with fellow students from around the world, part of an international youth organization dedicated to historical transparency. The network had emerged organically as young people connected across borders, united by commitment to factual history over nationalist mythology. Almost done, Mom, Emma whispered, then returned to her conversation. The documents being released tomorrow show how economic elites manipulated the founding for personal gain. Sound familiar? Rebecca waited as Emma finished her call, marveling at her daughter's poise in discussing complex historical issues with peers from different cultures. When the laptop finally closed, they sat together on the bed. You know I'm proud of you, right? Rebecca said. Both you and Lucas. You've handled this incredible situation with more grace than most adults could manage. Emma leaned against her mother's shoulder. Some days are harder than others. When classmates call us history destroyers or say we hate America. But then I think about what you always say. Loving your country means wanting it to live up to its best ideals, not protecting its comfortable lies. You've been listening, Rebecca smiled. Always, Emma replied, even when I pretend not to. They sat quietly for a moment before Emma asked, "Do you really think we're making a difference? Or are people too attached to myths to accept truth?" Rebecca considered carefully. Change happens slowly, then suddenly. Each document we release, each historical fact we verify, chips away at false narratives. Eventually, the weight of truth becomes undeniable. We're planting seeds that may take generations to fully flower. After bidding Emma good night, Rebecca returned to her own room, exhausted but unable to sleep. She opened Theodore Hayes's journal, reading his reflections on the burden of secret knowledge. His words resonated across time. The keeper of historical truth carries a sacred responsibility, not to any government or ideology, but to humanity's right to understand its own story. We are temporary guardians of permanent truths. As midnight approached, Rebecca made final preparations for the next day's revelations. More documents would emerge, more myths would crumble, more Americans would grapple with the complexity of their origins. The work would continue until every truth was told, every historical secret brought to light. She thought of the Northern Archive mentioned in Hamilton's letters of possible collections scattered across the former colonies, each holding pieces of the American puzzle. The task seemed endless, yet essential. Democracy required informed citizens, and information required truth, however uncomfortable. 3 years ago, she'd stood at the edge of financial ruin, a widow seeking stability for her children. Now she stood at the center of a historical reckoning that would reshape American self-understanding for generations. The transformation seemed impossible, yet here she was. As she finally drifted toward sleep, Rebecca's last thoughts were of the morning ceremony. They would release documents that challenged foundational myths, that revealed human frailty behind marble facades. Some would rage against these revelations, others would embrace them as necessary steps toward a more honest democracy. Either way, the truth would continue emerging from the underground chambers of Cedar Hills Farm. A revolution had begun here centuries ago, founded on ideals of transparency and self-governance. Now another revolution was underway, quieter but no less profound, as America finally faced its complete history. The security lights swept across the grounds throughout the night, protecting documents that would continue reshaping national consciousness. In the morning, Rebecca would again stand before cameras and skeptics, presenting evidence that complicated cherished narratives. But tonight, she was simply a mother who had bought a farm and discovered a purpose larger than she'd ever imagined. The vegetables were growing in carefully tended gardens. Her children were thriving despite extraordinary circumstances. And buried truths were finally seeing sunlight after centuries in darkness. The work would continue tomorrow and the day after, and for years to come. History would be rewritten based on fact rather than fiction. Democracy would be strengthened by honesty rather than mythology. And a family that had sought simple stability had found instead a profound mission. As sleep finally claimed her, Rebecca dreamed not of the controversies ahead, but of the farm as it might someday be. A place where truth and growth flourished together, where historical understanding enriched rather than divided, where her grandchildren might walk through gardens and archives with equal reverence for both kinds of cultivation. The dream felt possible, even probable. Truth, like carefully tended seeds, had a way of taking root and growing toward light. The harvest was coming, slow but certain, and Rebecca Hartley, unlikely guardian of American memory, would tend this crucial crop with the same dedication her ancestors had brought to simpler fields. Morning would bring new challenges, new revelations, new resistance to uncomfortable truths. But it would also bring new understanding. New connections between past and present, new possibilities for a democracy mature enough to face its complete history. The revolution of truth had begun at Cedar Hills Farm. There was no turning back. Now up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.